everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullish Show. Today I have with me Dan Levin, and welcome everyone from all around the world. We are on YouTube as well as on any of the audio site posts around the world, such as Spotify and of course Apple. But today I have with me Dan Levin. Now, Dan is the president and CEO, chief operating officer, I believe that means, and co-founder of ViralGains. He was inspired to start ViralGains back in 2012 after recognizing the storytelling power of video as a medium in building authentic, meaningful connections between brands and people. ViralGains' mission is to empower the voice of brands and people, creating authentic and lasting connections. It's about turning stories into conversations. And everyone has a story, and we're going to find more about what was some of the story behind how he started ViralGains. So ViralGains stands for telling yours and listening to their stories. They stand for freedom for creators and freedom for consumers. And it's the science and art of listening to and engaging with people. And as we know, we've got a lot of data these days, but we also need to be able to basically embrace the art of being a marketer and also an entrepreneur. Prior to ViralGains, Dan was a VP of Operations and Strategy at Viral Media Solutions, which was a full-service marketing agency focusing on SMBs and Fortune 500s. Dan graduated from the College of Management at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and that's where he's dialing in today from. Welcome to the show, Dan. It's an absolute pleasure.
Jeff, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this.
So, Dan, we all have a story to tell, and so you're working as an employee, working in corporate digital agency. What led you, number one, what led you to work for the agency? Was that an interest in digital marketing, being an entrepreneur? What was the original inspiration to move into the corporate world for a digital agency? And then I want to talk more about what made you decide to leap into the world of being an entrepreneur.
Great questions. It's so funny. I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here with the bio I put on LinkedIn and sort of the background that I usually have plastered all over the internet. So, truth be told, I actually co-founded that agency as well.
Okay.
I have sort of I have all kinds of philosophies about corporate governance, and one of the things that's important to me, we're going a little tangent, but I'll come back to the question, which is I always like to be honest with myself around sort of what level I feel like I'm operating at. And so, when I think about my time at Viral Media Solutions, which was that agency, I kind of mentally have parsed myself out as I was at a VP level. I was in college. Of course, I'm thinking here. Before that, I started a company called @𝓦𝓱𝓪𝓽, which I'll tell you about in a second. And there I'm like,
@𝓦𝓱𝓪𝓽.
Of course. Yeah, everyone always loves his name. There, I viewed myself as sort of director level. And the reason I say is because, you could have a 12-year-old start a company and they're like president, chief CEO, president. It's like, no, you're not. You have no idea what you're doing. Yeah. You're baking T-shirts or running a lemonade stand, but maybe head of lemons, but not quite chief executive officer. So yeah, my background goes all the way back to the sort of early social media days, back when YouTube was only, I think, a few years old, when Facebook was like 4 years old. Twitter was, I think, just a couple of years old. This was 2008 or so.
Yeah.
And I've always been, just broadly speaking, a serial tinkerer. It's actually funny. A funny tangent story. One time when we were raising money, our Series B, I was like in this boardroom in Chicago with like a dozen and a half investors. And as they were asking me the same question that you're asking me now, in my head, because this is just how I've always viewed myself. I just like to tinker with things. But instead of saying tinker, I said I'm a serial tinkler. And the room erupted, and I had no idea why. I was like, yeah, you're tinkering with things. It wasn't until the flight back home that I turned to my business partner and I said tinkling as in peeing, right? He's like, yeah, you did. I'm like, that explains the laughing, but thank God I didn't think of it back then. It would have completely screwed me up. But now it's just a quick story. So I was always a tinkerer of things. I loved messing around with platforms, and I became infatuated with social media back in the day. And one of the biggest things that I just found that was so profound, and I felt this on the receiving end of it, was that everything I'd ever consumed up until that point in time was always dictated to me. It was just like, here's stuff down your throat. It's like, and it doesn't, maybe it was delicious, maybe it was interesting content or a movie or whatever, but if you thought about it, media, it was always just one to all of you. And whether it's on TV, it's like, here's the content that we decide on this network we're gonna show you, and this is the content that's popular. We kind of like, there's a bunch of individuals, they can kind of puppeteer what is the zeitgeist or the cultural phenomenons that is popular. It's the same thing with radio, the DJs and the people that are sort of running the radio, whether it's print, the publishers had all the power, right? Before social media, and even the early days of digital, it was, you could go on the New York Times website, but it's a bunch of editors saying, here's the stuff that's going to be the zeitgeist of the day. And consumers, historically, ever since media was around, always just sort of said, yeah, that's just the way it is. And then this thing called social media comes around. And all of a sudden, it's wildly different. Because if you go on Facebook, it's like, well, where's the editors? It's like, there's no editors. It's like, well, what about Reddit and dig.com? Like, who's calling the shots on Twitter? Or it's like, nobody. It's just a place for a bunch of users to come together and self-decide what's popular. It's like, and how popular is it? It's like kind of massive. It's bigger than anything we've ever seen, quite frankly. Yeah. And so this sort of power dynamic had shifted permanently, where you have social media and what is viral, which I'll talk about in a second, sort of with virality, what is viral or what is popular or what is interesting, no one's controlling. It's a bunch of users that, whatever's trending on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else is just what everyone, by a sort of meritocracy and democracy, chooses to engage with and upvotes and shares. And the more shares, early on, the algorithms were so simple: more shares, more views, more people will see it, more shares, more views. It just became this endless loop immediately.
Much more organic back then.
Oh, super organic. And the funny thing back then was when something would go viral, everybody knew. It's like, did you see, you saw Gangnam Style? It's like, yeah, I saw that. It's like, and the double rainbow guy, it's like, yeah, I saw that. And, something would go viral, like the dancing baby, you could say, something goes viral. Everyone's like, I've seen the thing you're talking about. Now there could be a video with 1 billion views that's like, have you seen it? It's like, no, I haven't seen it. Yeah. But what was interesting was that brands, of course, they saw this and they're looking and saying, whoa, another medium that's massive, bigger than, could be bigger than TV, bigger than anything we've ever seen. Let's take our repurposed 2 a.m. infomercial and put it on YouTube. And we get all these eyeballs, right? Oh, no one's watching this. What the heck's going on? Well, maybe if I put it on Reddit, that'll do it, or Dig back in the day. No, consumers are just like, no, man, I'm not interested in this garbage. This is boring. This isn't cool. And I was watching this all happen in real time, and I became completely just infatuated. Just as a tinkerer, as just like someone is watching this happen, I'm like, I got the power. We got the power. The power is shifting. This is interesting. And so what I started to do was, and there was a few of these websites which were very popular at the time. Not even just talking about Facebook and Twitter. I'm talking about Dig, Reddit, StumbleUpon, Mix, Delicious, Propeller, Yahoo Buzz, all these kind of social news aggregators, if you will. And one of the things that I started to do was get really curious. And by the way, when I say serial ticker, I'm like, if there's a button, I'm pressing it. It's always been my personality. I see a button, I got to press it. If there's a wall, I got to see if there's a button behind it. Like, I just like to click on everything and look at everything and understand how it works. It's just how my brain's been wired. And if I don't get it, I'll make a spreadsheet and figure it out. And so one of the things I got really excited about was like, what is this thing that like controls what gets popular? I was like, wait a minute. There's tens of thousands of things being submitted and on certain websites, and maybe like 100 of them will be on the front page of like StumbleUpon or Mix or something like that. Like, what is that? What determines that? And then fast forward a few months of just tinkering, and I basically just, because these were early on sort of simple systems, I basically cracked the code. This was sort of my early days. I kind of cracked the code. So what I started to do is just feeling, not power hungry, but I was like, this is kind of cool. I would submit stuff to certain websites like mix.com or something. And I knew exactly what to do, what time of day to do it, with the kind of headlines that would be catchy, with the kind of, like, I started to figure out like these different things and okay, this time of day, this kind of headline, top 3 things, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, I got to read this. And then I started working with like a network of people I'd met online in various forums that were trying to figure it out. And I was like, wait, if you share this, so I'm going to submit it and it's going to be very catchy. And then you kind of share it, wait 5 minutes, share it, wait 6 minutes, 2 people share it. And we had like a group of people that were like kind of messing with it. And before you knew it, fast forward another few months, and in a certain time period, probably half of what went viral or what was popular at any given day was a group of probably 20 or 30 of us engineering it like this on command. We would say, here's what's going to be viral. There's going to be tens of thousands of things being submitted all around the world. And half of anything that's popular in any given day or going viral or being shared everywhere was just us kind of goofing around, being like, we figured out the formula.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I had no idea how valuable this would be until one day, the other thing that I thought was funny was back in the day, if you submitted a piece of content, like there were no scalable AWS systems that would be like, hey, how much bandwidth do you need? Is it popular? I'll give you more bandwidth. Is it not? I'll kind of like go down. So if you have a blog that's normally getting 1,000 views, a month, that goes viral overnight and gets 1 million views in an hour, it crashes. And I kind of, maybe not the nicest thing, but I found it kind of like, I was like, hey, I can crash websites. Check this out. I'm going to submit something and kind of crash it. But one day someone actually pinged me and said, hey, wow, you submitted my website the other day to just some random website and it went viral and things have been blowing up for me. And actually to this day, that blog is still around. I can't say who it is. It's a major tech blog, and they've become one of the biggest tech blogs in the world that all started. And at the time, they were only getting like a few hundred views a month. And they reached out, was like, you've transformed things for us. Can you submit that again? And I'm like, sure. I did it a couple of times. And then after like the 5th time of asking me to submit it, I was like, no, man, I'm just doing this for fun. I'm just having fun. Like, I'm not submitting your stuff. And he's like, well, what if I give you $20? I'm like, $20? That's interesting. I'll take $20. $20 for 1 million views. I have no idea what I was doing. I don't know what 1 million organic views overnight. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like about $20 worth. I don't know.
So you're doing this from when you're at college? When was this?
Yeah, this was, I think I was at this point, freshman in college. Yeah. Freshman in college. I had skipped on like a dozen business ventures that didn't quite pan out. Just silly things that, blogs or all kinds of stuff that I was doing even when I was in high school. Some silly things, but yeah. So I'm in college, freshman in college, thinking $20. If I do this like 5 times a day, I get $100. This is amazing. So I hit up an old friend. The reason that I called it, so I called up an old friend from high school. We got connected because we were in physics class in 11th grade, and we were thinking, what the hell are we learning Einstein's theory of relativity for? What do I need? Like, why? It's nice to be educated. In hindsight, I understand why it's nice to be worldly. But at the time, we were just like, are you going to do physics? I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm not doing physics either, but yet we have to do this paper. And I think we ended up failing that assignment. But the whole time we'd spent talking about business ideas. And I hit him up and I was like, hey, I got something. He's like, really? I'm like, I think I got something. There's this thing that's working, and these people are needing eyeballs for things. Yeah. Like in hindsight, I'm like, how did I not see this months earlier and start charging appropriately? So what happened was, I'll kind of make a longer story short because I like to tell stories. As you can see, our whole thing is telling stories. I like to share them. But I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And what happened in essence is we made a website called dig.com. Well, I mean, sorry, not dig.com. We made a website called Magic Shovels. Why? Because it was websites like Dig. Dig was the most popular at the time. So it's like dig.com. And we're like, well, we can promote things on Dig and make it go viral too. So It's like magic because no one knows how we're doing it. And when you're digging, you're shoveling. So magic shovels it is. And we would sell social media packages that guaranteed virality or your money back for
Right.
like, it was like guaranteed you pay $20 and you're going to go viral or else you don't pay anything. And on the fourth day, we closed, I believe, Sears. And that's when I went, holy crap.
Mm.
Like, what just happened? Like, where do they come from? Where do they find us? What is Sears doing this? Where at the time I thought it was all just a joke. In the interest of time, I'll kind of say the rest is history, but just to kind of sequence it real quick. One of the biggest challenges. So we were doing this and probably made something like, I don't know, maybe $500,000 doing this for the next couple of years or so, just selling these social media packages. One of the things that happened was, even still, the thing is, brands didn't know how to create good content. It was still early days of social media, and we were probably rejecting like 90% of stuff. We still guaranteed virality, or at least that you'd make the front page of a lot of these websites, but not that you would do it for any kind of content. So if the content's crap, there's just nothing we can do. So we realized, the two of us, we've got to help brands navigate this space. So we started an agency, Viral Media Solutions. It was a full service digital media agency that did everything from strategy, from ideation to strategy, to ideation, creation of content, videos, blogs were big at the time. So like, if it would be like, let's say you're, like a Hilton or something, we start a travel blog for you. And if you're, a car company, cool places to go, or like just a blog, images, early memes, and just basically all around consulting them on how do you do social media, what is it, and how do you make good content. And that was for a couple of years that we did because they didn't have the good content. So only after that, once we realized now we've done our part, the quality of stuff that people are submitting to us for social media kind of advertising is of much higher caliber, we can get rid of the agency. Agencies was never my thing. I always loved technology. I loved scalable systems. The only way to scale an agency is you hire more people.
That's
Now,
right.
I love agencies to death. Many of our customers are agencies, most of our customers. It's hugely important. And I could go on and on about why agencies are very critical for especially enterprise and global brands that couldn't possibly navigate the world in-house. So they're very important. But I never wanted to scale people. It's kind of like, many offices and this and that. I actually thought about going corporate. So senior year in college was now 2 years of Viral Media Solutions. And I think that I still had a decision. Do I go corporate and make my mom happy, who, when she was like, when I told her I was making money on the internet, she's like, making money on the internet, like, you scamming people? I'm like, no. It's like, I don't know, like everything. All my friends say, there's scammers on the internet. How can you make money? Sort of traditional, very traditional. It's also a funny story about my mom. God rest her soul. One time so my third year of college, things were doing well enough that I dropped out. I dropped out of college, and I went home that day, and everything was fine. Probably spent a week before I told them. So I told my parents, I told my mom, hey, I'm thinking about maybe potentially dropping out of college. Things are doing well with this internet thing we're doing, and I'm just not seeing the value of continuing at this stage. And she's listening intently, like, okay, interesting. Casually goes away. I'm like, she's casually walking up the stairs, casually goes in the bathroom, casually locks the door, and then yells, I'm jumping. It took me 2 seconds to make it up the stairs. I kicked the door open because I thought she was very convincing kind of. I'm from Ukraine originally. That's where I was born. We came here as refugees, and they, like, I can tell a whole story, which I won't because I get that I spent as much time I have in the first question, but I'll say just the usual immigrant background of coming here with nothing, no language. My dad washing dishes, my mom becoming a waitress where people are pointing to things because there's no language. So traditional hardworking values. So the idea of the idea of dropping out of college, the idea that she brought up my brother and I here so I could drop out of college to do internet scamming, it just didn't land well. And so she announced that she's jumping, and I kicked the door open, and I promised her I wouldn't drop out of college. Between you and I mean, she dropped out of college. I had to re-enroll. I had completely ruined my GPA and everything. I had to spend an extra year in college before finishing it. Finally got the degree to satisfy that. And then thought, maybe I should do corporate. But then I thought, nah, I'll hate it there. I want to do my own thing. And what we're doing is clearly interesting and working. And that was the evolution to ViralGains, where we said, listen, I don't want the agency model. I want technology. Let's build a technology out of what we're doing. And the biggest thing I said, what did we learn the most about social media? And the biggest thing we learned with this was this idea of two-way dialogue between consumers and content creators who could be marketers. And this idea of the two-way dialogue and just how rich that could be. So right now we're having a conversation, right? And we're on this crazy Zoom world medium where we're not in person, but it's working because I can still share stories and you can see me and you can hear my voice and we're connecting. And video was very powerful at doing that. But what a lot of marketers were still doing, even with digital, is they were talking at people. And if I were a wall right now, or if you were a wall, I wouldn't enjoy this conversation as much. And so we took this element and said, how do we take this element of just how much participation builds buy-in from consumers there is, and how do we facilitate this two-way dialogue? And as we started doing that, we realized the more consumers tell marketers, the more marketers can be responsive to those consumers in their advertising. And so, we started sort of building on this idea of insights, and then realized as those insights are generated, there could be interesting audiences that we create from those insights, because people are saying stuff and brands want to be able to find those people later. And so today, I know it took probably a couple minutes longer than you were thinking the story would take, but basically today what we do is we help enterprise brands called Fortune 2000, Fortune 500 here in the US through their agency partners, derive insights on the things that are important to them and building audiences off of those insights that they can then become addressable for the marketer, and do it all in the context of advertising they're already spending, so that it's not particularly difficult to switch from their current mode of operating.
Yeah. So you started around about 2012, but things started changing 2 or 3 years later as Facebook moved from starting to apply algorithms that made it more and more difficult. I'd be interested in your insights, and getting viral traffic is addictive, isn't it? Getting that attention by something you've created is addictive. I was trapped in it back in, the first 5 or 6 years of my blog, and I cracked the code. I was able to write stuff that, you published it at the right day, sent out the email at the right time, put it on the right platform, wrote the right headline, wrote a controversial headline, so on. So that worked and still works today. But back then it worked an absolute treat, and it was viral and huge. And that was a rise of companies prior to that, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, which were plugged into the worldwide media machine of social media, which I got excited about as well. So I can reach the world with my own voice, my own content, if I create good enough content. And you did that. It was fantastic. But that changed in about 2013, 14. That was one change. And then it happened again. And I think BuzzFeed lost a lot of their traffic. So is viral still really important to you, or that gig's over in terms of being predictable?
It's a fantastic question, and the answer is it's completely over. It's over. There was a period of time where with many things, right? You've got to catch the waves at the right time as marketers, and they do that all the time. You see brands jumping on trends of the day, and at the time, like that story that I mentioned, where the blog that we grew through social media, they're still big. No longer now relying on any kind of new virality. It might happen once in a while here or there, but anybody trying to engineer it, I would say forget about it completely. And not just that, but I think the model itself always had certain kinds of downsides. I think a lot of it was fad-like. It was so cool. Like when something went viral, it was so cool. But then when you looked at unless like if you were a marketer versus like a blogger to whom you're actually building an audience and building awareness, a marketer would say, let's say that was a cool video and some, car, was doing some crazy stunt and jumping out of the sky. If you're the CEO of Ford, you're like, so how many sales did we make? It's like, not really. I mean, everyone saw the car flying around. It was cool. But as an actual long-term marketing tactic, it's not viable. It's just very cool. Yeah. And we took advantage of it while it was cool. And I loved it. Just messing around. Once in a while, the rare situation was that some brand could leverage it in just the right way. They needed that for some reason. Now it's a lot more about thoughtful. It's almost like the old stuff is the new stuff, because it's so easy for people to get caught up in the latest thing, like ChatGPT, viral this, not thinking of it, but I could, 5 more trend of the day or of the moment, or Pokemon Go, or that was a huge for a second, and the whole world became infatuated. But the ones that actually stick to the tried and true, understand your audience, get to know them really well, like the insights, and really get to understand what they do, understand how to speak to them over time, multiple touch points, and really understand that customer journey, will always win anyone over anyone's chasing the zeitgeist of the day.
Yeah.
Where the caveat is, I like to say, just to certain agencies and marketers, to not think of these things as always being ors, meaning there's a room for and. It's just what percent of your focus is it? If 90% of your focus is always on the new shiny thing and 10% of the stuff that works, you're going to have a bad time. You're usually going to be a little bit behind. By the time you catch it, the train's just moving and moving and moving. You've got to spend, 90 to 95% of your time on 90%. I think it's 90. Let's call it 92-50. 92-50% of your time on the stuff that works consistently, that you're churning and learning and grinding over time, and have your, 7.5 to 10% for the fun, new, shiny, just to try it. What if it works? What if it doesn't hurt? What if we learn something? Yeah. But to your point, you're right. Things changed when the algorithm sort of changed, and viral went away. We still kept the name, but, because it was fun. Sometimes, once in a while, someone thinks we're still doing that, viral stuff, but I'm sticking to the name because I like it. And
well, it's a good name, and but like you said, the viral gig, which was you crack. I was able to crack the code quite regularly as well, and that worked for my website. So, but you got to move beyond what I call ego-driven attention seeking. Which is what viral traffic is. Like, oh, great, I've got 1 million views, or I've got 1,000 comments on LinkedIn because I created great content there, and you find content worked there but didn't work there. So, but you've got to move beyond the ego to actually going, just like the question you said before, how many sales do we make? In other words, is there content at the bottom of the funnel where the buyer intent, they're ready to buy? So then this raises the next area, which is what you do today, and some recommendations you'd make to any entrepreneur, agency, whatever, or corporate, to how do I get business online? How do I build brand awareness? How do I get insights about customers? Then how do I convert them to sales? So bottom of the funnel, if you say buy Ford car now and type it into a Google search engine, that person's ready to buy a car, right? That's a certain type of content. So let's move on to what you're doing today in terms of how you're helping corporations basically convert attention into sales. Tell us how you do that and the platform and tech you use.
Yeah, so everything we use is our own, like everything's homegrown. And, go back to that idea that the old is new. It's interesting watching this industry evolve over time. Now, if I were to speak solely to the digital advertising industry, I've watched it go through this interesting evolution where I'm almost surprised how long it took for us to be where we are as an industry. And I just realized that the story I was going to tell was probably going to be 30 minutes long. I'll skip the evolution of digital advertising over the last 10 years. I'm like, no, not a good idea. But what I will say is the most important thing is for brands and marketers to be pragmatic and also a little bit more simple. One of the things that kind of saddens me, maybe I don't want to be mean about it, but about where we are as a sort of industry, is that it's become so difficult and fragmented and complex. If you look at the number of companies in the space of broadly digital advertising, and you look at just the categories, I'm not even talking about, your search or your social, basic big categories or things like that. It's just like demand side platforms, supply side platforms, customer data platforms, data management platforms. It's just like, all these acronyms 24/7 everywhere, ad servers, ad networks. Which one are you? It is all, there's a data providers, and then there's the ones that do the verification and identity resolution. And it's just like, if I'm a marketer, I'm just like, which by the way is why they have agencies that, if I'm a marketer at a brand and I'm like, someone comes knocking and they're like, you're what? Like, we're a CDP that helps with your how are you different from the DMP from yesterday? Or the SSP told me that they do what the DSP does. And so this is why the agencies exist. And I feel I'm very empathetic to them about that kind of plight, because you don't know where to look. And even in these categories, in any one of those categories I mentioned, there's like 36 companies at least. There's a few leaders, but there's a bunch of companies there. So you multiply any given category by the universe, and you're dealing with, I was going to say over 10,000. I will stand by, probably over 10,000, but at least thousands of companies globally that are competing for ad dollars and confusing the bejesus out of our customers about what to do. And that's why I say about going back to basics, kind of like fundamentally back to, okay, before I knew or someone told me that I needed one of these things, what do I actually genuinely need? And for us, it comes down to the core of it is understanding consumers. And it's such a fundamental core, because especially if you're in the open web, because there's a lot of black boxes with these walled gardens. You don't know what Facebook is doing or where's the data going or where it's coming from, and how those algorithms work and how they're doing that. But if you're advertising on the open, if you're comfortable with that, that's one thing, which I think they've had their hand caught in the cookie jar one too many times to be trusted on certain things and brand safety issues and where the data is going and who they're selling it to. But that's a topic for a different day on that whole thing. But if you're advertising in the open web, what you need to do is you need to get a very rich understanding of where people are. You were kind of talking about, someone Googling buy Ford car now. That's like a marketer's dream. If they were only all doing that, like buy the thing now and tell me exactly where you are. And so the way that we help marketers sort of turn media and their advertising dollars into ultimately sales is by helping them move consumers from, say, part A of the journey to part B of the journey. Because you can ask a brand awareness question. Hey, are you aware of this brand? Or, are you aware, I don't want to use any specific examples, but, or any actual customers, but, are you aware this product exists, first and foremost? Then you have some people say yes and no, and you're kind of doing that awareness. And then once they realize they're interested in a category, you could actually start sussing out what's interesting for them in that category. Yep. And so if you're, let's say you're, if you're like a Pampers or something, for example, and you're trying to understand, what's important to the consumer in a diaper brand, and is it, that prevents leaks? Is that it's, soft to the touch, or that it's eco-friendly? And once you understand what is important to someone in a diaper brand, you can then communicate to them in a way that's meaningful for them. But if you're just showing a diaper brand to everybody that you think is a parent or is interested in diapers Or maybe you go on parenting.com and you assume, well, I'm just going to do endemic advertising, where I'm just going to go to where vertical level targeting. It's not going to be as efficient. And likewise, if you're buying data from sources that you don't know where it came from, you run afoul of various privacy problems. And I'll tell you, in the US, certainly privacy is top of mind.
Dan, what you really, let's, I suppose, distill it. Number one, you, as we had a chat before we leapt on and hit record, you said that one of the main ways you do that, in other words, is you are much more survey driven to gain insights into customers before you create any content. So you do surveys, gain insights, and then create content that communicates with what the consumer wants because you've gained those insights. Is that correct?
Mostly. Where we play in the ecosystem is we're the technology layer, right? Kind of going back to that, not running an agency thing.
Yep.
So for us, the technology layer that that brands can use to very quickly at massive scale get insights. As they're getting those insights, each bit of information becomes a person goes into an audience segment that they can then reach. But if there's certain insights that indicate to them that they need to change their strategy and content or anything like that, they take that back themselves for them to ideate, work with their creative partners, agencies. And then if it found, if Pampers is an example, were a client and they were interested in, reaching people that care about the eco-friendliness of diapers, or when they're going in the trash, what happens? Do they biodegrade or what it is? So they go back and, they can ideate and say, we need content. A, we need diapers that are eco-friendly if we don't have them in the first place. But B, once we have those diapers, we need to tell people that, hey, here's what we do to become eco-friendly or sustainable or carbon neutral or whatever it is. And then they can come to us and say, hey, we need people that specifically care about the eco impact of diapers for their babies. And then we go, great, because we told you that was important to these million people. Now we have these million people. And then we can match this very perfectly kind of engineered content to the people that care specifically about that. Yeah. And it's such a powerful thing if you're a parent and you care about eco-friendliness, and all of a sudden you see an ad for something that speaks to the eco-friendliness of a diaper. You go, oh my God, how do they know? It's like, well, remember when you told them 6 months ago? It's like, but how do they know? And then you're like, screw all the other brands. I'm buying this one because that kind of, going back to the idea of telling stories, brands are talking to people, people are telling them what they care about, brands are communicating back and forth. And that's why our sort of mission is empowering that voice of the consumer and that facilitating that conversation. And that's the tie into where we came from with the social media. That's what it's all about. It's about having a conversation. If you're talking at people in 2023 and beyond, good luck, my friend. When you're talking with people, it actually leads to remarkable ROI on advertising dollars spent.
So do you create content in conjunction with the corporate you're working for or the agency you're working for?
No. So they always come up with the content. What we do is help them ideate around, well, what questions to ask? What do you want to know from consumers? If you had a magic wand, and what data don't you already have today? Or what data do you want to have sourced in a privacy compliant way that is accurate? What would that question be? And what would you do with it? And once we kind of agree on what those insights should be, then we can marry it with certain content, help them with their advertising, but we don't touch the actual creative itself.
Right. Do you actually then help them, select the type of advertising should be using, such as programmatic or whatever, or social media paid? Do you do that as well?
So it's not so much that we consult them so much as we help to execute on those. So we absolutely can execute on those programmatic buys, and everything that we do is programmatic. It's not, of course, that a lot of people say, they came for the technology, stayed for the service. And we, of course, will always try to be as helpful for our customers because we want them to succeed with the technology, of course. But we don't actually, we don't consult them on, should you spend this much on search versus social? We're very much programmatic, open web shop. That's kind of like that. That's sort of where we play in the digital ecosystem. Anything that's not a walled garden, we can play in there. And social tends to fall into the walled gardens. Search is kind of a walled gardens. The agency partners are there to advise brands on what should be my media mix. Once they've decided that they need to reach people programmatically and in the open web and need insights and audiences from them, that's where our agency partners know they can come to us, and then we can execute that for them.
Right. Does your platform have a name, or is it just a platform that you use underneath your brand name?
We call it ViralGains Odyssey. So
Okay.
an Odyssey coming from internal brainstorm of, sort of Homer and the Odyssey and like the journey of the sort of like the buyer's journey, if you will, or the journey of a consumer with the brand. Everything's thoughtful. See, it's all about stories. All about stories, ViralGains.
So let's explore that a little bit. What are some of the things you've learned on the journey, and in terms of as an entrepreneur, you've had to evolve. In other words, had to move beyond viral because it stopped working. So then you had to evolve. So what have you learned along the way as an entrepreneur, like team building or marketing your own brand? What are some of the things you've learned along the way that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess if I had to distill it, because, a lot of times things are very case specific. They come up in the context of what should I do here or here.
Yeah.
I would say, broadly speaking, a few things. I actually, our ViralGains went through a couple accelerators here in the US. And one of the great things I get a chance to do is, as part of being an alumni, I get to kind of mentor other entrepreneurs and up and coming startups. And I always give them kind of the same advice, which is, again, stage appropriate, right? So these are like kind of earlier on, it's different, versus a little bit late stage, kind of different kind of advice. Besides telling them to run for the hills and don't do it, because it's not as glorious as people think it is. But one of the things I say is, when you hear, and this is the advice everyone hears, it's not the destination, it's the journey. It's like, I want you to like write that on a piece of paper like 1,000 times, as though you're in detention in school. And you have to really understand that, because entrepreneurship, what I've come to learn, is mostly, I'll keep it PG. It's mostly, this is something someone told me, so I don't take credit for this, but they described it in a perfect way. It was like, entrepreneurship is like F word, F word, F word, F word, F word, F word, F word. And then it's like, hey, that's neat. It worked for us. Oh, F word, F word, F word, F word, F word. So it's just 20 F words followed by the occasional, something worked, or that's neat. And if you don't enjoy those F words, this isn't for you. And it's the same thing that I learned, which is, when you look at athletes, you look at the, Ultimate Fighting Championship, or, like fighting, like here in the US, like UFC is big, and Bellator, and sort of these professional fighting leagues. You look at these guys, and it looks so glorious. They come out and then they fight and then they're victorious. It's like, you do realize that's like 0.001% of their life. The other 99.999% is them in the gym, just like, oh God, I can't do it. And someone's like, you got this. They're like, my heart's giving out. So, one of the things that I've really come to learn, and it just sounds so cliche, and this is what I always say, is come to love the journey. Once you're committed and you realize that that's what it's going to be like, then trust yourself, is what I say. And one of the things that took me a while was, especially if you're a disruptive entrepreneur, it's so easy to get caught up in trying to figure out, why are you having these ideas? Why isn't it done this other way? Because again, if you're really trying to do something a new way, the logical thing that we always wonder to ourselves is, why isn't it already done this way? I must be an idiot, or this must not be the way to do it. And I had a lot of self-doubt along the journey, where I would think so many times, even as a professional, that there's some things that we didn't really talk about, but that's part of that 10-year evolution of the space, where I'd be looking at things being like, why does it work this way? There's got to be a reason. This giant system set up the way that it's set up. And I don't even want to ask. Like, I'm scared to ask. I don't know why it works this way. And at this point, I'm too scared to ask, because everybody seems to be going along with this way of doing things.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to kind of Be like, no, I have an intuition and this is illogical and I believe in this deeply. And I just know that this is wrong or this is right, or this could be easier or it should be different. And it took a while for me to lean into that, eradicate the self-doubt and realize, look, if I'm wrong, at least I'm making a stand and someone can tell me, rather than having these limiting beliefs. So I think if as any entrepreneur can genuinely take those two things, limit the self-doubt, which allow them to work quickly, efficiently, all those things, and to enjoy the constant suck and fail, I think they'll succeed. And the last thing I'll say, and this comes back from my tinkering days, and this isn't even something I think I could teach, because either people do it or they don't. But once in a while, bend certain rules that aren't the law. Don't bend the law, but bend certain rules about the way that things need to be done. I'll give you a quick anecdote. Back when we were first starting and we were rebranding, we had the original 3 founders, and the next 7 people were marketing interns. We had 7 marketing interns, because you were asking about how do you brand yourself. And this is, it's 2012, 2013. And we had these interns, and I'll tell you this much. They'd be putting in like 40, 60 hours. Like some of them were like, I just want to, like, some of them were just like, I just want to help volunteer. I just want to learn stuff. They weren't even official interns. They were just people that would hang out with us because they kind of liked our energy and it was very high. Yep. And I could go on and on about the value of that. People ask about like, how do you find mentors? And I'm like, well, if you're in there and you're like, will you be my mentor? Go in there and be like, yo, what's up, man? Like, be exciting. Use your energy. And we use our energy to attract a lot of talent. So when we were small, we looked huge. We had these 7 interns on social media, tweeting at people, posting stuff. They'd go to events and conferences and they would just walk around with our shirts, and customers would be like, yeah, you guys are huge, right? They didn't know that there was just like 3 people who were barely getting started. Like, I see you guys everywhere. You're tweeting like 20 times a day. You got like 50 blog posts up at all times. You're making video content, because we were good at doing what we were doing. And so it's kind of like, there's not even a rule around this, but it's almost like a life. It's like a hack. It's like, how do you appear much bigger than you are? It's like, I don't know, just make a lot of noise. You can pretend to be bigger than you are before you even are as big as you are. And that's like the idea of like doing things that we can't really teach. And the last example I'll give, and I promise it's the last one. Here's an actual practical one that's even a little bit more applicable. When we were, raising money, if these early investors are listening, I love you guys to death, and this is not meant in any way to be to be a negative thing. It's actually a positive thing. But we were very mindful about some of the first people we raised money from, and there's a few names here in Boston that just were well known. Everybody knew these investors. And what we said to ourselves was, what do we know about psychology? Things like FOMO, and how do we do that? And so one of the things we said was, we very methodically identified, imagine we were like detectives. We had like a wall of like, here's the ones, here's what you got to get to. And what most people will do is when they're pitching people, they're asking questions like, how much are you willing to invest? How do I get the most out of you? We flipped the question. The question we asked was, what's the least amount you're willing to invest? I don't even want you to make this a difficult decision for you. Will you invest for $1,000? Why was that important? So, the first few investors we got, they invested what was little to them. Why? Because then we could say it was not a lot of money for them to say yes to, and we gave them a good deal, so we weren't very dilutive. Because it's not like we raised, hundreds of thousands and kind of gave away the farm. We said, what's the least you're willing to take? What happened was, once we got the first few, we went to the 4th one and said, hey, we're ViralGains. Are you interested in investing? And they're like, oh, is anyone else in? I'm like, well, these 3 people have already invested. Like, who's invested? You got so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so? It's like, yeah. They're like, okay, I'm very interested. It's like, well, what's the least, by the way, we knew who's 4th and 5th and 5th and 6th and 6th. By the time we got to the, 20th investor, Our first round, we raised from like 60 individual investors here in Boston. We had a giant seed round. By the time we got to the 20th, we were like, hey, we're ViralGains. Here's the 20 investors that have already invested. They would just go, I don't care what you do. Shut up and take my money. And that's like a bending of the rules. That's sort of going back to the, like, how do you teach that? And I would just say the creativity behind, for any entrepreneur behind what you do and the thoughtfulness. Think about what we did. Rather than saying, will you invest $1 million and them saying no, we said, will you give us $1,000? All I want to do is be able to say you're in. Well, they don't need to know how much you're in for. They don't need to know any of that. They just need to know that you're in. It'd be like me going to Mark Cuban being like, I'll give you 0.0001% of my company for $1. And he's like, sure, I'll give you $1, whatever. And then I can go walk around and be like, yeah, so Mark Cuban's an investor, like blah, 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 blah. You say that to anybody, they're going to be like, wait, Mark Cuban's an investor? I'm in. Well, if he's there, I'm in. And long-winded way of saying, we probably did dozens of these clever, life hacky-like things that you just got to be. This is going back to the self-doubt thing. It's like, who are we to invent a new way to ask investors for money? And we were like, I don't know, just do it anyways. And it worked. And that's what I'd say. It's be creative, be in it for the long haul. It ain't all glory. And then, that self-doubt thing, it's useless. It's just useless, mind clutter. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it and run. Plus maybe 30 other things I'd tell them, but next time.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. Now, I have one last question, which is about the now and the future. And it's 2 letters. It's called AI. So where and ChatGPT, which is almost synonymous now. All right. So where do you see AI and ChatGPT, those technologies in today and in the future for marketing? And let's just keep it to marketing, for example. Where do you see that, and how are you guys using it? So there's 2 questions there. So I'd be interested in your thoughts.
You didn't say 5 to 10 years, did you? Did I hear that right?
You can say 5 to 10 if you like.
I have. Okay, maybe I heard that. Maybe it was another interview you were doing with someone else. But, yeah, I have no idea. 10 years from now, I refuse to make any predictions about even 5 years is becoming tough. But I'll tell you what's interesting. I think there's going to be I'll start with a prediction first, and I'll talk about what we're doing. There's going to be, I think, Renaissance level innovation in the creative sector of marketing. What I've seen these technologies do on the creative side is nothing short of, for me, miraculous, truly miraculous. I've seen some of the imagery that it creates. We were talking a little bit about that. The images, it's starting to create videos. It's starting to, it could listen to someone talking for about 15 seconds and go, all right, I got you. I've listened to you enough. And it can start speaking just like you. I saw recently like a 12-minute trailer for a movie. Not a 12-minute trailer for a movie. I think it was a movie itself, like a 12-minute movie, completely prompt-driven generative AI generated. Was it good? No. Was it revolutionary for what I'd ever seen before? Yes. And the crazy thing is you've seen this, GPT launches. It's kind of neat, kind of sucks. They're like, okay, fast forward 2 months. How about now? It's like, holy crap. And then it's like, then GPT-4 comes out and it's like, all right, I'm going home. I think between 3.5 and 4, if you look at certain metrics, it went from being in the bottom 10th percentile for how good people are to the top 10th percentile for how good people are, just like that. And I think if they can solve certain issues with certain scaling issues and the challenge of creating new, more advanced models, which they'll solve. Right now, if they were to create a GPT-5, I'm not convinced that they even could technologically do it. Just the amount of computing power required to run some of these models, I think is stressing the system and the complexity of them. But they'll figure it out. A lot of this is just technological challenges that we haven't sought to face because we haven't had the need for this level of modeling. But I think they'll figure those out. And my prediction is that creative uh, at scale and personalized creative at scale is going to become a lot more feasible.
Yeah.
There was something the industry tried to do creative with certain technologies, and it was just never quite what it needed to be. Whereas on the flip side, so I think where the industry faltered on the sort of creative technology, it made up for on the foundational targeting pipe connection technology. So like if you want to do programmatic advertising, it's amazing what we can do. You know, we can collect insights from tens of thousands of people in seconds, put it into audiences, port it into, you know, a different platform, send it to the customer. They can immediately be targeting them with other things. So a lot of that piping that we spent most of our technology on, like optimizing, should I show Jeff this ad or this ad and why, and, you know, kind of like figure it out, like, you know, the probability that you'll will convert on any one of those, and tons of that sort of framework is laid out there. And there's some very sophisticated tools. If you try to use Google AdWords, the damn thing is, even I'm confused sometimes. Or Facebook advertising, marketers that execute campaigns have to be very tool savvy. But that's where a lot of us have spent most of our focus on that technology, because creative was very difficult. But what AI can do now to generate beautiful imagery on the fly with very few prompts. I mean, imagine if you're browsing imagine you're browsing the New York Times or some other, you know, website or whatever, Motor Trend, and in real time, there's certain information that the publisher knows about you. What device are you on? Where are you in the world? What else do we know about you based on the other data sources we have access to? Maybe you're reading an article about, you know, the latest supercar. You could have one of these AIs generate on the fly. You could literally almost like imagine like a reverse prompt where it's asking, hey, I have a person, hypothetically, ChatGPT, I'm this blog, and the person's reading an article about this, and here's what I know about them. What would be an ad that, you know, here's like the foundational elements of it. Maybe I want to, you know, I'm Ford and I want to show them the new Ford Mustang, and I want an ad that like just that you think, knowing the entire corpus of human knowledge and at least the entirety of all psychological literature that's ever been written, what do you think Jeff would like in this case? And it'll go, here's your ad for you. So I think that as a 5-year out reality is not impossible if we don't run into like an S-curve problem with some of the stuff. So personalized advertising at scale, and will make marketers' lives for creative amazing. And I'm sure you've heard of so many people that are using it now. You could say, I need my next 5 blog posts. This is available today. It's like, oh, I want to write a blog post about this. It's like, here's a blog post. Like, nah, I want it to be about this instead. Here it goes. Yeah, but I want it in the style of Shakespeare. Here you go. No, but I want every word to begin with the letter B. Yeah. And every third word with an S. It's like, here you go. And they can be pumping out those articles. You know, one article about this or that. So funny enough, again, we won't have enough time to talk about this, but I think the industry will run into a little bit of a challenge of garbage content, which is websites that will prop up very quickly, and low quality YouTube channels and low quality websites and publishers where it's just AI generated content, just kind of creating this massive amount of generic like text, gaming the SEO engines and just kind of funneling people to it. But over time, I think we'll find a solution to that where we get into a more interesting realm where marketers are using it to help them with their marketing strategy. Even today, you could ask it, if you're an entrepreneur, you could probably go to ChatGPT and say, I'm starting this kind of business. Give me like an MBA level business strategy that's actually quite sound, that covers all the areas, and it'll do that. It'll actually do that. And you're not as worried if you're writing code that it'll make a little mistake. It hallucinates a little bit. You know, you can kind of deal with that. So you could do that as an entrepreneur, and it'll tell you. You can say, "What about this thing? What about that thing? What about this thing?" So I think marketing, advertising, these industries could not be more primed for technologies like generative AI to help on the ideation and content side, strategy side, but also then the execution side. And that's some of the stuff that we're excited about on our end. We're using it even on the most simple level. We basically gave everybody at our company a license to ChatGPT. And we said, it's not a lot. It's like $20 a month. We just said, everybody gets this. We had an AI day. We took everybody, several times we've met. We brought everybody in together to kind of showcase their cool, funky things they're doing. We literally said, play with DALL-E, play with ChatGPT, play with Bard, play with anything you want, work-related, not work-related, as much as humanly possible. And we kind of had like a show and tell day.
Yeah.
And also, and some folks were like, hey, it can help with it can certainly help the marketing team come up with content, pitches, certain aspects of proposal writing. It certainly helped me with things like email writing, which is amazing that it could actually save me time. Me personally, I've got folks that will send me like a 40-page report. And, it's like, hey, here's this studied thing on the industry about the data marketplace. And I'm like, who's got time for that? So I'm like, copy, paste. Hey, ChatGPT, like, what do I like? Give me a 1-page summary of this. Yeah. And it'll tell me, and it'll be dang good. Yeah. Dang good. I'm going to ask it a few times to make sure it says the same thing 3 times. Cause like, I don't want to get back to the person that sends it and be like, it was really fascinating what they said about the elephants being mined for data. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I totally read the report. Elephants, in Tanzania. So I might ask it a few times, like, you're sure that this is what this 40-page report's about? But I'm using it to save time across the board. And we're certainly looking into it for all kinds of interesting ways that we can apply it to ask better questions. That's another way you can do is, hey, Pampers is curious about these things. What questions should they ask? ChatGPT is a beautiful tool to tell a marketer, here's some interesting ways you can use ViralGains to glean insights and build audiences for this journey that you're trying to build with these consumers. So I'm super excited about it. 5 years from now, I think things look great. Beyond that, you'll find me in a bunker somewhere, swatting it away when it becomes sentient. I'm still not sure on that whole thing, but we'll see.
Yeah, it'll unfold in its own creative way. And I think the things you mentioned, like AI helping us as humans being even more creative, I think also to scale creativity, also scale content, also to provide insights into data that you just couldn't do as a human quickly or easily. And even, like you said, distill all this noise of this 40-page proposal into a summary for me. Thank you very much. So there's a lot of ways AI can help. And thank you very much for sharing how it is impacting today, how you work and how people use it for marketing. So how can people contact you, Dan? Is the best way to contact you and the team if they want to use your services or just want to really annoy you or something? So tell us, what's the best way to contact you?
The way to annoy me is to send me an email that says quick question. That's the number one way to annoy me. But if you want to do it kindly, the best way to contact me is connect with me on LinkedIn. And it's certainly anyone looking to actually work with ViralGains to help, glean insights about their audiences or insights about things about the audiences that they might not know, to augment their existing data strategy. They can build those audiences out. They can certainly go to our website, fill out a contact, reach out to us, and I'll certainly mention that you saw me on the show, give you a nice, great, special treatment, the white glove service by me personally. I'll manage your campaign personally. But there's the number of ways they can reach me. Those all work.
Right. Thank you, Dan, for sharing those insights and your journey and your stories. And I look forward to meeting you in Boston one day in real life.
I would love that. Jeff, thanks so much for having me on the show. It was really a pleasure to be here.
It's been a pleasure, mate. As we say in Australia, or as I say in America, it's been a pleasure, buddy. Thank you very much.
Cheers.